Anyways, welcome back to another year of the strip till canola trial. My name's Carlo, for those of you who don't know me. I've been at Farming Smarter for about 5 years now. I work mostly with Mike and Gerbir on the agronomy crew, and this trial behind me has been my baby for the last 3 years now. So this is our 10th site year on this trial. Every year we've done multiple locations. So on overall, that's about more than 450 plots and about 750,000 canola plants worth of data we collected. So we definitely got something behind this trial. We learned a lot over the last 3 years. Things have not always been consistent, but I heard somebody say once, and I kind of like the quote, said that the only thing that's constant in agriculture is that nothing is constant. So anyways, so a little bit about this trial. It's a 12 treatment trial. We have 3 different cultivation methods. We have fully cultivated plots, we have no-tilled plots, and then we have strip-tilled plots as well. And then on top of that, we have 4 different seeding methods. Our first one is a seeding method with a precision planter. We came in with a 4-row monosem planter. We seeded on 15-inch rows. And then the other 3 seeding methods were with an air drill, where we had 3 different openers on the air drill. The first one was a disc hoe opener, and then the other 2 were twin chutes, or whatever you like to call them, the spreader tip opener and a narrow knife opener. So between these different seeding methods and between these different cultivation methods, we have everything from a very low soil disturbance up to everything to a very high soil disturbance. And then we also duplicated this on irrigated as well as on dry land. So we decided to use the narrow knife and the spreader tips as it's set up as a rigid shank system. So we wanted to see if the dual chute system would provide a better canopy closure over the plots. As if we have seed coming out both sides of our opener, hopefully we have better ground coverage and we'll have less space between our rows. Another goal of this is better seed bed utilization, whereas if we can spread our seed across more of the seed bed, we have more water especially available for use. Compared to where you have a precision planter, it puts each seed perfectly in the exact same spot along the row. You know there's going to be a seed exactly 1.5 inches, whatever your seeding rate is. And then, but on these system where we have a dual chute system, we're spreading the seed over a larger area. So let's say, for example, and one easy way to explain it, if we have 10 units of water over 1 square inch, and if we can spread 5 seeds over more areas than 1 square inch, we're using more of that water. So strip tilling for row crops especially is not a very common practice in southern Alberta. I can only think of less than a handful of farmers who actually practice strip tillage, and this would be then for corn, for beans, or for canola. So what is strip tilling actually? It's when we come in with an implement before seeding and we till about 4 inches wide of the soil, and then we leave the rest of the soil untilled. So that way we create about a 4-inch gap where we can seed, and then we leave the rest as untilled, leave it as protection for our seedlings, and we come into plant, we seed right into those strip-tilled rows. Now the thing I like about this trial is that there's visual differences. It's not all about yield. We have some trials, everything looks very similar throughout the year, and then once you take the combine through, it's like, okay, there are differences. But no, in this case, this trial, I can already tell you by looking at plots, I know which ones are going to excel, I know which ones are going to have big differences in treatments, so when I take the combine out later this fall, we'll be able to prove that. So many of you probably know this, 2023 has been a very interesting spring. We had 2 very big stresses already early on. We had extreme heats in the second week of May already. We had 30 degrees, and then we also had extreme flea beetle pressure. I think some people have had less or more flea beetle pressure. I've heard some people hardly had anything. They didn't spray any insecticide. In our case, on our site over here, we did have a lot of flea beetles, and we had to spray insecticide a couple times just for control. But the good thing is, canola is it's a pretty plasticky plant. It can adjust very well. So we have done studies in the past where we played with seeding rates in canola, and we found that anywhere between 40 to 100 seeds a meter squared, about 2 to 5 pounds an acre, it doesn't make much of a difference for your net profits. We've done this in dryland and irrigated multiple sites as well, where your lower seeding rates might give you a little lower yield. However, your savings and seed costs overall doesn't affect your net profits. So in that sense, as long as you have a rough, good population of canola, you're set. But if your seeding rate is not affecting your yield, then maybe we can find out what is affecting your yield. So I have two plots behind me, one on my left and one on my right. And I mentioned earlier that I like this because you can see visual differences. The plot here on my left is a strip-tilled plot. So we came in, we strip-tilled in the spring before we seeded. The one on my right over here is a no-tilled plot. If you look down these two plots, you can see the better emergence, a better stand, more even stage on the strip-till plot. The staging is even a little bit ahead. When I looked at these plots on Tuesday, I noticed a couple plants that were starting to bolt. I see a couple behind me over there, whereas the no-till plots over here, I didn't find any that were bolting yet. So getting that early season stand a little bit ahead in your stage is important. If you can get ahead of your flea beetles or even the later heat stress we probably will be getting later on this summer. Between all the treatments, the planter is the greatest. It has better canopy closure, even though it's seeded on a little wider rows than our air drill. It has even stand, even rows. Everything about the plots look better and the yield results better as well. So if I could convince you of one thing going off of this is to buy narrow row planters. And I specified narrow row planters because we have done studies in the past as well where we compared the row spacing on canola. We've done a 9.5-inch spacing on air drills, and then we've done narrow row, so I think 12-inch spacing on the planter, compared it to a 20-inch spacing on the planter. The narrow row planter excelled. It did much better than the wide row planter. Even the narrow row on the air drill did much better than the wide row planter. And taking all of this into account, narrow row planters, we did 15 inches over here. It's a little bit between that 20 and 12, but anyways, it's still narrow. That would be my suggestion for that. On the dryland plots, the planter is a little bit behind on stage-wise. So when we seed it, we seed into dry conditions. And like I said, the planter, doesn't utilize the seed bed as well. But even though the staging is a little bit behind, I have faith and I know it will catch up. And our results will still be better for the dryland planter plots as well. So let's move down this way a little bit and let's look at some disco plots.
Have you looked at doing fall strip tillage rather than spring?
Yes, so the question was, have we looked at doing fall versus strip till, so fall versus spring strip tillage? The first year of the study, we did spring strip tillage. 2 years ago, so the year before after that, we did spring, and then this year again, no, sorry, I mixed it up. So we did spring, fall, and then spring. So we did have a little bit of inconsistencies there, just due to implements being in the shop for a bit and land. We didn't have land confirmed. So there's a little different. I'll come into this a little bit later as well, but I could bring it up. There has been a little notice about that as well, as if you strip till too close to your planting date, you create almost air pockets in your soil that haven't been filled. And then when you come in with your seeder, your seed will be sitting in an air pocket and you won't have proper soil to seed contact. So fall strip tillage, I think, would be better to avoid that, especially if it's a late spring, then you don't have that issue. Yeah. So I got two plots right here. This one is a no-tilled on the disco opener, and that other one right there with the purple flag is a strip till with a disco opener. Looking at these plots, I can tell the strip tillage one looks better. Both of these plots don't look as great as the planter ones, as you probably noticed already. The stand is a little bit more even in the strip tilled plots compared to the no-till plot. And then, even though whoa, there we go. So that's just the disc hoe openers. So let's move down a little bit more again and we'll look at some spreader openers. So here beside me, these two plots right here are the two spreader openers. The one is a strip-tilled plot and the other one is a cultivated plot. So as I mentioned before on the spreader and the narrow knife, because it was the dual shoot system, we expected a quicker canopy closure. If you take a closer look at some of these plots, you can notice that the plants are separated by 1 inch to 1.5 inches as they fall on each sides of the seed row, whereas then the fertilizer gets banded in the center. So even though we expected greater canopy closure, we did not achieve this. I did some canopy measurements just yesterday, and so overall the planter plots had 10% greater canopy closure than the disc hoe plots, and then the disc hoe plots had 10% greater canopy closure than the spreader and the narrow knife. Part of the troubles with the spreader and the narrow knife system could be that it's the system we're using, it's a rigid shank system. So the way it's set up on the seeder is that if the seeder hits a bump or if the seeder jolts in any way, it affects the entire depth system of the openers. Whereas our disc hoe openers and our planter, it all has independent depth control. So no matter if you run through a gopher hole, your depth is still going to be even. I think there is actually one plot behind me somewhere that had a gopher hole in it in the spring. And when we hit it with the openers, you can see behind the gopher hole, there's no seed coming up because the entire seeder was moved by that gopher hole. So on the dry land, the differences are visible as well. We did have that little greater seed bed utilization on the dry land. However, the cultivation methods seemed a little different as well. So on the dry land plots where we had cultivated plots and we went in with a spreader opener, we had such high soil disturbance that sorry, I mixed that up. Dry land plants. So on the dry land, let's think with dry land here. So the dry land plant stand, the cultivated and the strip-tilled plots with the planter were better because there was a little better soil disturbance. Even though it was dry land, we still had, because it was such a hard packed soil, having a little bit of disturbance was excellent for the planter. Whereas, like I did say, the cultivated plots where we went in with our spreader, openers, there was so much soil disturbance that almost fluffed it up too much, it dried out too quickly, and we did have poor emergence in the spring. So another reason our narrow knife or spreader openers might not be doing as well is the packer wheels on the back. You need a little thicker packer wheel, a little wider packer wheel to be able to get the seed that goes off to the side. If you're running narrow packer wheels, you're really only packing in your fertilizer, that's in the center. You want to be able to pack in your seed that's on the outside rows as well. So canola is one of the highest value crops we have in southern Alberta, especially on irrigated land, yet many of us were still using cereal seeding methods on canola. So under irrigated systems, we need to up our game with our canola. So taking more of a row crop approach to this would be one way to do this with our planters. We have done more studies in the past with planters, and we've found that there's even benefits for using planters in cereals. We've done studies with durum, and we've done studies with pulses, where we use planters and everything from a large bean to a small lentil, and everywhere across the board, the planter showed improvements. So even though a planter may be higher management or higher maintenance, it does add that extra value to your crop. And especially planters are becoming widely used in seed production, where it's extremely easy to load up your male bays in your 4 rows, and then your female bays in your rest of your rows. So you can seed your bays very easily in that sense. So they are becoming more popular in seed canola, but we should be using them in every other seeding method as well. So even though the row crop world is more intensive, it's definitely an opportunity to increase your management. So, talked a little bit about the seeding. Let's go to the cultivations a little bit. Does somebody mind grabbing me my water? Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So, why are we wanting to move away from cultivating some crops? Especially for corn and seed canola, like mentioned before, it is still very high intensive tillage systems, especially around here. We always talk about wind erosion. You know, your neighbor cultivates his field, it blows overnight, thank you. And then the next morning, all of his topsoil is in your ditch, or it's in the canal, it's in your front yard. I've seen some pretty gnarly sand drifts. But it's not only about wind erosion, it's also about soil erosion. Water erosion. In Iowa especially, over the last 160 years, they measured in 1 foot of topsoil has been eroded due to water erosion. In the last weekend, we were fortunate enough to get about an inch of rain. However, about half of that inch showed up in about half an hour. It was a torrential rainfall. So when I looked at these plots on Monday, you could see the soil movement and the soil washing out of the plots. Where the cultivated plots showed much greater soil erosion, the strip-tilled plots just had some erosion in the seed rows, and then the no-tilled plots, where there was enough trash coverage, showed next to no erosion as well. I wish it was still visible, but since the ground is wet now, you can't really see it anymore. I was really hoping we would be able to see it, but I don't think we can. So it's frustrating, right? Because we want to till to make a good seed bed for our canola especially. We also don't want to till to protect our soils. It's always a toss-up depending who you talk to. But I got a solution for that as well. It's called strip tillage. Strip tillage is really the happy medium right in between. You have the benefits of tilling your soil where you're going to seed. You'll have great soil to seed contact. You'll warm up your soils a little bit quicker. But then you also don't till between the rows. So you're going to have that extra seedling protection. You're not going to have as blowing soil, as you'll still have standing stubble to protect you from wind erosion, and you'll be protected from water erosion as well. John Kolk out of Enchant, many of you may know him. He's one of the only farmers I know that actually practice strip tillage. He does it in his corn, his canola, and his beans. And I've had a chance to talk to him and some of his crew over the years, and many of the things that John has found in his trials of strip tillage, we found in this trial as well. So one of the things was that I mentioned before is we need to let the soil sit for a little bit after strip tillage, otherwise we create air pockets. So we noticed that with our higher cultivation methods, or like our strip tillage methods, and then we come in with a spreader opener. We work the soil so much, we create those air pockets, not as great of a results. Another thing that John has found, that we found, is weed control. Especially this year, we've had lots of issues with glyphosate tolerance kochia. There's no weed that you can't kill without. So if you're not using tillage, you do need different chemistries available to be able to control your weeds. And another thing that he found is watching where your tires go. So having a proper GPS setup is super important, as you want to make sure you're seeding into your strip till rows at all time. And also, if you're hauling fertilizer carts behind your strip tiller or your tractor tires in front of your seeder, you want to make sure you're not running into your strip till rows, as you'll just compact them, and then when you go into seed, you'll have uneven seed depth, and you're not going to get as good emergence in those rows. And the last thing he also found is that it depends on the year. So he has been doing this for 4 to 5 years. He's noticed some years there's really good benefits of strip tillage. Other years he didn't notice a difference between strip tillage or not. So that could easily be due to moisture and heat. The last 2 years we have had quite high heat and little moisture. Probably be getting another one of those years this year. But like I said before, the only thing that's constant in agriculture is that nothing is constant. So even though this is the 3rd year and the final year of this exact trial, this is definitely not the end of strip tillage here at Farming Smarter. We've already looked at some trials back there where we're working with strip tilling into cover crops. We'll be doing more of that over the years, and we hope to be doing work with strip tillage where we'll be putting down our fertilizer with the strip tiller beforehand. We're still working on funding on those projects, but hopefully next year we'll have something in place for that, and then we'll be working more closely there. So in the trial where we did the roller crimping demo, that was a trial where we went in and we strip tilled into our cover crop, and then we seeded corn, beans, and canola. Still the first year on that study. There's the one thing that I have noticed that is really neat is just the seedling protection. Having those disc plots or where there's no cover crop, there's not as much seedling protection as where we have that fall rye standing up nice and tall between the rows of crop. Then again, such a robust fall rye cover crop might be hard to kill, so we'll see where that goes. And of course, the one thing, whether we like it or not, policy changes are happening as well. It's all about carbon sequestration and even greenhouse gas emissions. We're doing a trial this year where we're measuring greenhouse gas emissions in canola. So it's something we can't avoid. We're all working towards it. But then this is one way we can improve our systems. So is there one system that's the best and that's going to work for everyone? Absolutely not. It all depends on your soil type, where you are, your climate, the seeders you have, the crops you're growing. There's so many different variables yet. But if there's one thing that I can walk away with here, that you can walk away with, is that planters excel. And all the studies we've done, the precision planters excel the air drills in every situation. That's the one takeaway over here. So then using a planter, taking more of a row crop approach to your canola, it increases your management, but it also increases results. That's what I want to say.
What about insects? If you found planter versus you are planting less, but yeah, so what about insects?
So plants per acre, we did the same seeding rate, even though the planter was on wider rows. So there are more seeds per row. Insect pressure, it's hard to really tell in a small plot system, I think, like this. Whereas you have a flea beetle can jump from one row straight over to the next plot. We do have some field scale strip tillage trials. Louis Barda, I don't know if he's here or not, but he is working on some field scale trials, so he might notice a bit more of results on field scale levels. He's doing field scale where he's strip tilling into cover crops as well and into different stubbles. So we'd have to ask him about those.
Are you noticing any difference year to year of soil temperature, strip till versus no-till?
Yes, so year to year, it all depends on the spring, but the trend is the same. So we also measure soil moisture and soil temperature in the different tillage plots. So I remember the very first year where we had frost events on somewhere around the middle of May. The strip-tilled plots, the cultivated plots, they got the coldest. The no-tilled plots stayed the warmest. The strip-tilled plots were right in the middle. And the same happens for warming up in the spring, where it starts to get warmer. The cultivated plots, since there is more air movement, they warm up quicker. No-till plots don't warm up as quick. Strip-till is right in the middle. So the strip tillage is really the happy medium. Same with moisture. When you do these probes you see in the plots, they're not the actual neutron probes themselves, but we're testing our soil moisture down to a meter, and the same results are there. The cultivated plots dry out quicker due to there's more movement in the soil. The no-till plots don't dry out near as quick. Strip till, it's right in the middle. Yep.
What's involved in the strip till? Like, is it a disc and then packed, or?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily packed. We have light rollers on the back, but it is just a disc. We have a shank going in the ground with a disc, and then just more of a, I don't know what the name of the roller is called, but it's not a full roller. Ken, do you know what they're called? It's a light roller. It doesn't pack it as much as more just make it even. That's one way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. Tiller is just like it's a beater bar that just smooths out.
Yeah.
Like vertical tiller.
Do they use the residue managers as well?
Yes, and there's residue managers on there.
Residue managers on a packer, right?
So on the front, will there be a residue manager? Yeah.
Is that separate operation or is it all done? Because they bounce it on the drill.
It'd be a separate operation. You'd want to get in before you go to seed.
So it's, so it's not feasible to have it as an operation.
No, it wouldn't be. I think you, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna ask, so the precision planters obviously probably getting better emergence.
Yes.
What's the math, or how does is there also yield advantage to the planter over the air drill, say, or
Absolutely.
what the numbers would be in relation to yield versus seed savings and stuff like that?
So the yield definitely has been greater every time with the planter. As to seed savings, we haven't done any economical analysis on that. I'm hoping we can do this after our final year. We can take all our years in together. So I'd have to get back to you in a few months probably with that one after we have this, but yeah.
I might have missed it, but I was wondering about especially nitrogen fertilizer placement with the different drills. Is that equivalent or standardized across the different seed years? Or?
Not really. So the planter, we use the 2x2 method, 2 inches to the side, 2 inches down for our nitrogen. The disco opener is it would be the same, but then where we have our spreader and our narrow knife, it's a little different. We have the dual chute. So the seed goes off to the side, and then the fertilizer is in one single band down the middle. So it's not quite 2x2. I'd say probably more 1x1. But it's right in between the two rows of seed. Yep. And then the phos all went down with the seed. Yeah.
So that's the problem with planters, is it not, to get the amount of nitrogen that is required?
Yes, so lots of especially the seed canola, they're pushing for 200 to 250 pounds of nitrogen. That's a lot to put down the planter. We've had to float on some beforehand with the Valimar, so I'm not standing in the wind. So we had to float on some fertilizer with the Valimar beforehand just so we could reach our targets. That depended on the field, of course, depends how much background we have. But definitely in the deficient areas, we did have to go and apply beforehand.
You could set up your strip tiller to put your nitrogen.
That's the goal. Yeah, so that's where I said moving forwards, hopefully we can work with the strip tiller. We have our fertilizer attachment on the strip tiller so we can place our fertilizer down before we seed with our strip tiller. That would eliminate one pass through the field, right? If you don't have to take your loader through.
I mean, but then you're still putting down, you still got edge. You still got to put down some.
Yeah.
So you still got to make that pass.
Yeah, always feel free to walk around. Some of these plots are labeled. Take a look, and got any other questions, just find me.
Right into grain residue?
Yes.